I doubt that I will ever forget the sound of that sentence as it escaped his lips. Serafina Elwood has been left with everything, including your residence, business, and financial assets. There was a brief moment when I believed that I had misheard him. My ears were ringing. My spirit. It abruptly ceased. Not in a metaphorical sense. In essence, it appeared to continue. I felt as though my body was unable to comprehend the lawyer's recent statement, as my breath stopped in my throat. Serafina's fingertips were perfectly manicured and icy as she squeezed my hand. The fabricated tremor in her grasp was palpable to me. She leaned in closer, her eyes already welling up with those fragile, translucent tears that managed to avoid smudging her mascara. "Lyra," she whispered. "I didn't know." Her voice scarcely audible and her body trembling with a heartbreak that was expertly crafted. I would like to take a moment to reflect. My elder sibling is Serafina Elwood. To be precise, 3 years elder. Shockingly effective. A person who enters a room and transforms it into a magazine cover experience. People adore her, and she is cognizant of this. She has been beguiling her way through life since we were children. Nevertheless, she remained my sister, my family, and my dependable confidant. I had the impression that she was. I refrained from uttering any words. I was unable to. My tongue felt weighty and thick, as if it had solidified into stone. The words were imprisoned in the back of my throat, suspended between confusion and fury. I gazed at Mr. Halden, the lawyer, anticipating some form of correction, such as a cruel jest that would be followed by a more logical explanation. However, he made only a sluggish blink, gazing downward at the folder that was in front of him. My existence was contained within that folder. Additionally, it had been recently transferred to my sister. The room was eerily silent. The air conditioning's hum abruptly sounded as though it were thundering in my ears. I could hear the faint tick of the antique brass clock on the corner shelf, which was counting down the seconds of a new reality that had just emerged. My fingertips trembled. I desired to express myself, to rage, and to request an explanation. However, I remained seated, immobilized, and hollowed out by disbelief. My body tensed in the leather chair, as if it were bracing for an impact that had already occurred. In what manner? For what reason? Those were the sole words that reverberated in my mind, reminiscent of a shattered reel. What is the reason for Serafina? Why not me? What is the reason for everything? I gazed at her. She appeared to be on the brink of tears as her lower lip quivered. A tear was wiped from her cheek by her hand. It was a stunning display. I will provide her with that. Oscar-worthy. But then, something flickered. Her eyes briefly altered, exhibiting a sharp, rapid, and calculated movement for a mere fraction of a second. She briefly observed the will in Mr. Halden's possession, then turned to me, and then returned to her weeping expression. Like a rubber band snapping into position, her gaze flickered back. That was the moment I became aware. She was aware. The emotions were not a result of shock. They were relieved. She had been anticipating this moment. I could now hear my heartbeat, a deafening pounding sound that echoed in my ears. My nails were digging into my palm. At that moment I experienced it. The envelope, still securely concealed within my luggage. The one that Callum presented to me mere days prior to his passing. Seal with wax. The reverse of the item bears his initials. I was hesitant to open something that was so heavy. I believed that it was merely a formality. Insurance documentation? A message of farewell. However, I now recall his pupils. The manner in which they regarded me when he presented it to me. I am aware certainly, but I am also sad. Intentional. However, only open this if you are experiencing an uneasy sensation. His exact remarks. And nothing about this felt quite right. Eventually, I relaxed my hold on Serafina's hand and gradually released it. Her head tilted slightly as she blinked at me. Image of distress and anxiety. However, my expression did not correspond with hers. I did not provide her with any items. I reached into my bag, and my fingertips trembled slightly as they encountered the envelope's edges. It was time. It is time for Callum to hear the truth, as he did not trust anyone else to do so. I arose gradually. Mr. Halden raised his eyebrows. Serafina's smile experienced a slight pause, resembling a disguise that became dislodged. After placing the envelope on the polished oak table between us, I said, "There is something else," in a composed manner. Something that Callum desired to peruse, in case it proved necessary. At that instant the room silenced. To comprehend the force with which that moment struck me, the sensation of the floor dropping out from under me as Serafina's name was read, it is necessary to have an understanding of the pre-existing state of my existence. Prior to the silence, prior to the will, prior to the envelope, Callum and I had been married for a decade. 10 years of grandeur and chaos. Of literally designing a livelihood. Juniper and Brass was the name of the boutique interior design firm that we jointly operated. We constructed it from the ground up, debating over fabric textures and laying tile samples on our kitchen floor at midnight as if it were a matter of life or death. Income was not the sole objective of that enterprise. It was our identity. Afterward, the diagnosis was rendered. It began with Callum's tendency to neglect things. Small objects. Keys. The name of a patron. Initially, we made light of the situation. We were simply too preoccupied, correct? However, one day he lost track of how to return from the office. On that day, everything underwent a significant transformation. Doctors verified that it was an uncommon neurological disorder. Rapidly. Unforgiving. No treatment was administered. Only time. And not a significant amount of it. I experienced a sensation of being submerged in slow motion. Serafina intervened at that moment. Always she was the one with the answers. The most ancient. The most composed. A person who, in some way, never allowed life to affect her too severely. She arrived on the day that Callum received his final diagnosis. The sound of heels tapping on the hospital floor. Her black cloak remains adorned with snow. She embraced me tightly, treating me as if I were a fragile piece of glass, and stated, "You are not obligated to do this alone, Lyra. I am present at this moment." Additionally, she was continuously. She assumed responsibility for scheduling appointments, organizing medications, and providing assistance to our clients. In an effort to preserve the status quo, she was lauded by all. Friends, nurses, even Callum. They all agreed that you are fortunate to have a sister like her. For a period of time I had faith in them. However, there were items. Minor matters. The kind that you disregard when you are frightened and exhausted. Similar to the manner in which Callum would cease to converse upon my arrival in a room. Alternatively, Serafina appeared to consistently possess his phone. Responding to telephone messages. Responding to SMS messages. Like a competent executive assistant whom I never employed. One night, I recall passing by Callum's study and hearing their voices. Low. Rapidly. Urgent. As soon as I entered, they both ceased. The business contracts were being updated, and Serafina smiled a wide, sugar-sweet smile and stated, "We were just figuring out how to do it." There was something off about her demeanor. However, I was too fatigued to continue. Callum appeared to be culpable. Not in a state of despair. Absolutely not frightened. I am merely culpable. I disregarded it. My spouse was facing death. My sister was providing assistance. What was the reason for my excessive paranoia? However, paranoia is merely an instinct that we have yet to develop the ability to articulate. Callum was remarkably silent during those final days. However, one evening he summoned me to his bedroom. His voice was coarse. Not even close. His fingertips trembled as he presented me with a thick, sealed envelope containing his initials and wax. "Lyra," he said, his eyes fixed on mine. "Open this only if something doesn't feel right." The paper was warm from his touch as I held it in both of my palms. His eyelids fluttered shut before I could inquire about its significance. Then he retired to sleep. Afterward, he never truly awoke again. I concealed the envelope after his passing. I could not bring myself to open it. I believed it to be a farewell missive. A compilation of passwords. I would be able to read his words without breaking someday, and it would be a gesture of affection. However, Serafina's name was subsequently announced. I abruptly experienced a sense of unease about everything. I was standing outside Mr. Halden's office a week after Callum's funeral, gazing at the ancient brass plaque on his door as if it were written in a different language. My stomach was in a state of torsion. I had not consumed food in nearly 2 days. I was unable to. My entire body was hollow, as if morning had consumed me and expelled a ghost that was clad in my skin. The office was warm and silent. The temperature is excessively high. The type of warmth that causes your epidermis to itch beneath your clothing. I sat on the edge of the leather chair and endeavored to maintain a low volume of breathing. In flawless posture, Serafina sat beside me, dressed entirely in black silk. She appeared to have emerged from a morning fashion catalog, sporting a tasteful pearl brooch and a solitary teardrop earring. Naturally, she wept. A linen handkerchief was used to gently wipe away tears. The type of weeping that elicits sympathy, admiration, and attention, as opposed to the kind that leaves you gasping and red-eyed, as is the case with me at the funeral. She placed her hand on my knee. Her voice was subdued. "Lyra, what was he able to leave behind? It was initially yours. Are you aware of this?" I simply nodded, despite the fact that her words stung my spine like cold. Mr. Halden entered the room, his presence immediately commanding. He was a tall man with broad shoulders and kind gaze. He was trusted by Callum and I reciprocated. He sat behind the polished desk and unzipped a thick folder that bore our names. My own. Callum's. Serafina's. He exhaled. Serafina Elwood will receive the totality of Callum Thorne's estate, which includes real estate, business assets, and financial accounts, as stipulated in his final will and testament. I am unable to adequately articulate the circumstances of that moment. It was as though the room was evacuated of its oxygen. My ears were ringing. Tunneling occurred in my vision. I am convinced that the walls shrank. I breathed. At least once. Twice. Serafina's gentle gasp conveyed that she was equally as taken aback as I was. She grasped my hand and held it tightly. Lyra. I was unaware. I would never. Her voice was as sharp as glass, and for a brief moment I nearly believed her. Subsequently I observed her visage. I witnessed it. That glimmer. For a brief moment, her gaze was drawn to the folder in Mr. Halden's possession before returning to me. It was as though she required confirmation that I had acquired it. If I continued to fulfill my role as the bereaved, naive sister. Suddenly everything changed. I refrained from weeping. I refrained from screaming. I remained seated in a flawlessly still position. However, my thoughts were whirling so rapidly that they collided with one another. How could Callum subject me to this? What is the reason for her? What am I neglecting? At that time I recalled. The envelope. I could almost feel it through the fabric of my handbag, where it was securely stored in the side compartment, where I had refrained from touching it since the day he presented it to me. As if in a slow echo, Callum's words were murmured through my mind. Access this. In the event that something does not feel quite right. Well, nothing seemed to be quite right. I rose so slowly that the chair scarcely creaked beneath me. Mr. Halden halted in the middle of his sentence. Serafina's expression was still frozen in its meticulously crafted mourning as she blinked at me. I reached into my bag and felt the envelope's thick borders, the wax seal remaining perfectly intact. My fingertips were trembling. Not out of dread, but rather from the sudden realization that everything was about to undergo a transformation. I said calmly, Mr. Halden, there is one more item that Callum has left. Something he advised bringing in the event that things did not feel right. I placed it delicately on the table in front of him. Serafina refrained from moving. At that moment I came to the realization that she was already aware of the contents. My recollection was inaccurate regarding the envelope's weight. It was sealed with a deep crimson wax and sat on the center of the table like a stone. CT Callum's initials remain immaculately embedded in the surface. I was unable to refrain from gazing at it. The seal had been a symbol of affection to me when he first presented it to me. But now it was pulsing with a more profound energy. Something foreboding. Mr. Halden adjusted his spectacles. As he reached for it, his expression transitioned from mild perplexity to focused concern. He inquired as he gingerly turned the object over in his hands. Where did this originate? I forced myself to breathe forcefully. Although my voice was subdued, it was consistent. I received it from Callum 3 days prior to his passing. He stated that it should only be opened if it did not feel appropriate after he had left. Serafina exhaled gently, almost resembling a sneer. Although it was too low to be audible to be called out, it was powerful enough for me to detect. I refrained from gazing at her. I was unable to. I am at risk of losing the tranquility to which I was adhering by a thread if I do. The wax cracked with a gentle snap, causing my entire body to tense as Mr. Halden meticulously broke the seal. He extracted a number of pages, including legal stationery and a handwritten note that was affixed to the top. The paper was examined by his eyes. His eyebrows gradually began to coalesce. He refrained from addressing the audience immediately. He has just finished reading. Despite the fact that I could observe sunlight through the blinds, the room abruptly became frigid. My chest was constricted, and my fingertips were damp. I could hear each tick of the brass clock in the corner, as if it were preparing for an invisible detonation. Callum, what is it? What did you leave me? Eventually, Mr. Halden cleared his throat. His expression was novel as he gazed upward at me, something that had never been present before. Concern, respect, and something else. Lyra, he said slowly, this document is legally binding. It is a notarized codicil, a direct modification to Callum's previous will. It supersedes the original. I breathe. Overrides? Serafina's body tensed in my presence. Overrides, what do you mean? She inquired rapidly, the gentleness of her voice dissipating like mist in the sunlight. The handwritten page was removed by Mr. Halden. I have been directed to read Callum's final letter openly in the presence of both parties. He halted and exchanged glances with us. I nodded. Serafina did not, but he nevertheless initiated the process. If you are reading this, Lyra, my wife, then something transpired that I had anticipated. I apologize. I have failed in more ways than you will ever be aware, and this letter is a component of my endeavor to rectify the situation. My airways contracted. The room was disintegrating in my presence. The only sound I could hear was Callum's voice in my consciousness, as if he were standing behind me. Mr. Halden continued. I made a catastrophic error months prior to my diagnosis. I was bewildered and vulnerable, and in that moment of weakness, I placed my trust in the incorrect person, an individual who I never foresaw would exploit my illness for their own gain. My innards lurched. Serafina's claws struck her armrest. She was not weeping at this time. No, Mr. Halden did not cease. Serafina persuaded me to execute a new will, assuring me that it was only transitory. She claimed that she was safeguarding you. However, I only realized too late that she was deliberately positioning herself to seize everything. It was located there. The truth as it is revealed. Mr. Halden glanced up from the missive, his expression bordering on apologies. The estate transfer is reversed by this codicil. Lyra, Callum has delegated all responsibilities to you. The savings, the business, and the residence. It is entirely yours. Serafina's voice was as sharp as shattered glass, and her chair creaked as she leaned forward. That is not feasible. You are not sincerely approving of that in lieu of an executed will. But Mr. Halden abruptly interrupted her, maintaining his composure and unyielding demeanor. This document has been witnessed, notarized, and dated. It maintains its integrity. Serafina's expression altered. There will be no more confusion or sorrow. Only rage will remain, calm and smoldering. However, I refrained from turning my gaze this time. My gaze met hers, and for the first time in years, I beheld her in all its clarity. The silence that ensued after Mr. Halden's remarks was not merely tranquil. It remained lifeless. It was as though the room itself was holding its breath. No, Serafina did not speak immediately. Her expression was frozen between disbelief and wrath. The hand that had once held mine so tenderly now grasped the edge of her armrest, its knuckles turning white. I refrained from migrating. I refrained from blinking. I was unable to glance away from her, as my eyes were fixed on hers for the first time. I was aware. My every suspicion, every uneasy glance, And every night I would toss and turn, pondering if grief was causing me to become paranoid. This incident served as conclusive evidence. I was not overly concerned. I was correct. Mr. Halden positioned the envelope and its contents adjacent to the folder that previously contained the original will, which is now null and void. Unproductive. A counterfeit document that has been manipulated. He gently cleared his throat, gazing at Serafina. Elwood, you will be required to submit any objections in writing. However, I will be forthright with you. This document is unbreakable. Callum has left a highly detailed trace, and your opportunity to contest it is limited. Serafina chuckled. At least once. Precise. Bitter. He was ill. He was unaware of his actions. Are you truly willing to accept the testimony of a dying individual in lieu of a legal document that was executed weeks prior? I slowly turned to her. Are you referring to the document that you coerced him into signing while he was unable to think clearly? The one you assisted him in drafting while I was out filling prescriptions? She immediately fixed her gaze on me. It was located there. That lightning-fast spark. There is no longer any pretense. She stated, her voice now lowered and frigid. You do not comprehend his intentions. He was terrified. He required an individual who was capable of assuming responsibility and possessed a clear vision. You were deteriorating. I interrupted him as he was my spouse. Although my chest was hammering, my voice remained unwavering, and she responded that I was your sister. I was safeguarding the infrastructure that he had constructed, which neither of you could do. Mr. Holden's pen clicked quietly as he closed the file in front of him. Regardless of your intentions, Elwood, Coylum made his final decision in a legal, authentic, and unambiguous manner. She abruptly stood, her chair scraping against the parquet. Her respiration had become shallow and choppy. At that time I observed the truth in her, unadulterated and unhindered. She had never arrived to provide assistance. She had arrived to acquire. She had capitalized on her opportunity at Coylum for a period of time. Until he recognized her for who she was. Until he regained his sense of self and our shared identity. He had now spoken. From beyond the grave through ink and parchment, with a greater clarity than he had ever experienced while alive. It was not about the business or the money. It was a matter of trust. Regarding the truth. Regarding the provision of an item that has not been owned by any other individual since his passing. A voice. Serafina declined to bid farewell. The corridor echoed with the sound of her heels as she exited, her coat draped over her arm, a warning shot that faded into silence. I remained seated for a brief period following her departure. My body finally relinquished the tension it had been harboring for days, possibly weeks. I gazed at Mr. Holden, who offered me a slight, almost sympathetic nod. He intended for you to possess this, he stated tenderly. I nodded. I was unable to communicate at this time. My throat was constricted, but it was not due to mourning. It was now something else. Something that I had not experienced since Coylum's illness. Strength. Not the boisterous variety. The type that is acquired. The type that is constructed through fire. Forged through betrayal and sealed with truth. I gathered the envelope and the amended will, my fingertips brushing Coylum's signature. One final gesture of love. One final measure of protection. And I thought to myself, he was aware. He was acquainted with her. He recognized me. Even in the end he picked me. Strangely, the silence undergoes a transformation after the tempest has passed. Within minutes, my world had been nearly toppled and split in half in that room. However, it was now serene. Peaceful, not mere silence. I was finally able to breathe profoundly, free from the burden of uncertainty that was pressing down on my chest. The correspondence. The envelope. The truth that Coylum neglected to disclose. It did not merely alter the legal outcome. It altered me. For several days thereafter, I stored the envelope on my nightstand. I would find myself gazing at it before retiring to bed, not because I needed to reread it, but because it evoked a sensation that I had not experienced in a long time. That he had faith in me. Coylum committed errors. I do not dispute that. He permitted Serafina to enter the premises at an excessive distance. He disregarded matters that were beyond his jurisdiction. Indeed, he betrayed me once. I will not dilute the truth. However, in the end, when he was left with nothing but clarity and time, he bestowed upon me a gift that was far greater than any contrition. He provided me with the truth. He presented me with an option. Additionally, he provided me with protection in the only manner in which he was still capable. The days that followed were not conducive to cleanliness or tranquility. One message was transmitted to me by Serafina. A voice note that was frigid and clipped, expressing that she would not forget this. I did not respond. It was unnecessary for me to do so. She had fired her projectile and she was unsuccessful. It was not because I defeated her. Rather, it was because Koilam elected to observe her in a clear light only once, which was sufficient to reverse all that she had accomplished. I subsequently took a break from the enterprise. Due to necessity, I did so. It was imperative that I ascertain my identity in the absence of him. Without her, absent the disorder, it was silent for the first time in years. There is no one who is making decisions on my behalf. I am not under the supervision of anyone. No one is seen smiling while concealing knives in their palms. It was a harrowing experience. Additionally, it is liberating. I initiated the process gradually. File organization. Painting the office. The logo is being updated. Juniper and Brass was replaced with Lyra Studio. Simple. Sincere. My own. I acquired new consumers. I re-established contact with former acquaintances. I began declining invitations more frequently, particularly those from individuals who elicited a smile akin to Serafina's. During the process of reconstruction, I stumbled upon an unexpected discovery. Joy. Not the boisterous variety. Not of the cinematic variety. However, the type that infiltrates a tranquil kitchen while you are brewing coffee. Or when you successfully manage to sleep through the night without experiencing grief. Or when you find yourself laughing at an inane event on television and realize that you are no longer feigning it. Of that nature. Occasionally, individuals inquire as to whether I have forgiven Kylam. I inform them of the truth. I am of the opinion that forgiveness is not always characterized by a boisterous or attractive appearance. Occasionally, it appears as though the individual is putting their weight down and continuing to advance. I may never have a complete understanding of the decisions he made when he was frightened, but I will always recall the ones he made when he was certain. He opted to inform me of the whole truth. Not a residence. Not a bank account. This is not a business. The truth. And that is priceless. As a result of the absence of the individuals you cherish, the narrative they leave behind becomes your own. I have exhausted myself by carrying only my own version. So, if you are viewing this and your intuition is indicating that something is not quite right, pay attention to it. I neglected mine for an excessive amount of time. Open your eyes immediately, without waiting for a sealed envelope. Occasionally, the love you require is the truth that they were too apprehensive to express while they were alive. If you have reached this point, I am sincerely grateful for your willingness to hear my narrative. While it was challenging to disclose, certain truths are too significant to conceal. If this resonated with you even slightly, please inform me in the comments. I am also eager to hear your narrative. And if you have ever placed your trust in someone who did not deserve it, please be aware that you are not alone.